This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Suzi.
Hi, my name is Suzi, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Thank you, Josh, for asking me to come and share tonight. And congratulations to the CHIP people and the birthday people. That's awesome. It's really great. And welcome to the newcomers. You know, this is actually the room that I got sober in, and so it's very dear to my heart. This is, I sat in that seat right there where Wayne is sitting. That's the seat where for my first meeting, and it was a Sunday noon meeting, and I came because I heard you had free coffee. And then I found out you had free donuts, too. That was a perk. So I did not come here because I thought I had a drinking problem, and I certainly did not come here to stop drinking. So it doesn't really matter why you come. All that matters is that you stay. You know, if you, the gifts that I have gotten here are, they can't be bought, you know, and I am not the same woman that walked into this room. I guarantee you that. My sobriety date is October 25th, 1998. And when I got here, I had been living in a tent on the side of the freeway in Culver City with my son. 2 years prior to me getting sober, I had lost custody. The police had taken him. My sister adopted him, and I hadn't talked to him in 2 years. They didn't know if I was dead or alive. And that day, the day that I walked into this meeting, was actually his 9th birthday. And I talked to him that morning for the very first time before I came here, not knowing I was coming here. I called my sister and to let her know that I was alive, and to tell him happy birthday, and that I loved him, you know, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. And that's the person that walked into this room. I hadn't worked in years. I didn't have a car. I had the clothes on my back. My purse had been in the car that I had that got towed while I was coming down off speed for the week prior. And in that purse, I carried a blowtorch. Like, it was okay. That was just it was not a purse size. It was a full-blown. And the really sad thing is that I didn't smoke anything. I just thought it was cool, and I liked to make pipes. So I wasn't claiming my purse. That's how I walked in here. And I don't even think I weighed 100 pounds. I had been drinking every day since I was 17 years old, and I was 36 when I walked in. So, what I have gotten in this room right here is it's unbelievable. So I will tell you what it used to be like way before that. I was raised in Riverside. My dad died when I was 3. He died a month before I turned 4, actually. And I remember my dad. I have absolutely no memories of my mom before I was born. Like, I remember my sister told me that my dad, when he found out that my mom was pregnant, he quit his job. He was an accountant, and he quit his, like, he started working from home. So however he did that, that's what he did. He started working from home, and when I was born, he had this big old wood desk, and he put my car seat in the little file part of the desk drawer. And as a little girl, I remember being in diapers and running to the door every day when he would come in if he had appointments or something. When my dad walked in the door, I remember just running, like I couldn't wait to see him. And I have absolutely no memories of my mom before he died. So, but when he passed away, it changed. I remember when he died, it changed my life hugely. I remember my mom crying. I wasn't sure what had happened, but I knew it was a big deal. And I knew that it was, I think that I kind of thought that I was angry at her. There was a part of me that was really angry at her, and what happened for her when my dad passed away was that she became fanatical in her religion. And so she, for the next, until I left home when I was 17, I mean, she was absolutely just fanatical with it, you know. I was a little girl, I was like 5 years old, knocking on people's doors. We were Jehovah's Witness, and I remember I would be doing 100 hours a month knocking on people's doors trying to convert them. And we lived in Riverside, and it was really hot, and I would like get overheated in the summer and pass out, and my mom loved that because that meant people would let her in the door so that she could preach to them. You know, it was a plus. And I mean, it was just it was very weird. And we didn't celebrate any holidays, and we didn't celebrate birthdays. And my mom would march me into class the first day of school every year and tell the teacher that if there was any celebrations, that I was to be sent to the principal's office because I was not to participate, and we didn't salute the flag, and we didn't, and I was basically told that, you know, like I wasn't allowed to associate with anybody who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. So, and that included I have a sister who's 20 years older than I am, and she had quit the religion. And so I really kind of grew up, it was kind of like, well, she's, you know, we can get close. She's my sister, but she's not going to make it. We're going to live forever. She's not going to make it, so don't get too attached. And that's a very bizarre way to grow up. And that's not about the religion. That was just how my mom handled my dad's death. I really believe that. And so, so it was just so I was definitely different. You know, I wasn't, I was just different, you know, and I was this little girl. I didn't wear pants until I was like in junior high school. I remember my first pair of pants was a pair of pink brushed denim, and I was so excited. I didn't care if they were pink. I got pants. You know, so it was just it was bizarre. And so in this religion, like I was you know, they say Molly Mormon, whatever the comparison to that would be. Like I was just up on the stage from a very young age and in Bible plays and just doing all this stuff, and it was just, that was my whole life. And so when we had this very weird relationship with my sister and my brother-in-law, and for years he never allowed us to see my sister or my nephew hardly at all. And she would sneak over to our house. And then all of a sudden, when I turned 13, that all changed. And all of a sudden, we were like having dinner. They would come over for dinner. The whole relationship changed. And when I was 15, he started molesting me. And when I was 16, I got kicked out of the church. And so all these people that I had been raised with and known my entire life were no longer allowed to talk to me. And so when I was 17 years old, I came here to visit for 2 weeks, and I just never went back. You know, I didn't really have anything. My mom talked to me like as much as she had to, really, and so there was just really nothing there for me. And when I came here, my very first job was at UCLA, and I was a biller, and my very first boss was an alcoholic. She was very proud of that fact. There was no denying it. She didn't try and hide it in any way. So I'm 17. She's probably like 36. And she was a product of the 60s. And she introduced me to my first desk, which had the file drawer in it. I love those file drawers, those great big drawers. And in that file drawer went the Baileys and the Kahlua. And everybody would come over in the morning, and they would pour their coffee. The coffee was right next to my desk. And then they would open my file drawer, and they would pour in their booze. And we would start working, and it was a great day every day. So that was my introduction to alcohol. That was how I started drinking. There was no, I didn't try it once when I was a kid. Like, that was just it. And I started drinking with her, and we worked in Westwood, and so we drank every morning, and then we drank, you know, at lunch we would obviously go and have cocktails for lunch because we were in Westwood, and that's what you do there. And then she lived in the Mid-Wilshire district, and I lived in Santa Monica. My very first apartment was on 9th and Wilshire, and I paid $244 a month rent, and that included utilities. And yeah, if I had that now. But that was a long way to go from Westwood, all the way from Westwood. So we would have to have happy hour while we waited for the traffic to die down. So once we got off work at 4, we would go out for happy hour until 7. Usually that's when it ended. And then we would decide whether we were going to her house or whether she was coming to my house. And then we would just drink at the bars locally, wherever we went. And she introduced me to this guy, Rico, and I think I paid him $200 or $300 for my first fake ID. But it was a baptismal certificate that couldn't be traced. And so every time I lost my ID, which I did often, I could just go and get a new one. It was great. And so I was introduced to bar drinking, and I loved drinking in bars. The bar for me, especially the ones up by her house, that was the first place that I really felt at home. I felt absolutely unconditional love in those bars. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter what I said. They always took care of me. And I was the baby in the bar, obviously, and so nobody was allowed to hurt me or mess with me in any way. So I was very safe, and I absolutely loved it. And I drank in bars all of my drinking. That was always my preference. And so that was basically the beginning of that was how I started drinking. And I drank. I worked up there. I worked at UCLA for 4 years, I think, or 3 years. By the time I was 18 or 19, I was working at UCLA, and then I was working down here at Marie Callender's at night. And that created a whole other set of friends and after-hours drinking. So then I would work all day at UCLA and then get on the bus. I never had a car. That was just not necessary. Then I would get on the bus, and I would go down to Marie Callender's, and I would work there until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and then we would all go out from there until 2 in the morning, and then I would go to work the next day. And I was very young, and I could do it, and I was making all this money, and I did not put anything away. And I didn't know anything. I had no clue about life at all. And so that's what my money just went on going out. I also loved to have dinner parties, and I would always I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I would always get Dunhill cigarettes with the different colors at the top. I loved those, and I would fan those out on my little coffee table. I thought that was so cool. And I would always buy a half an ounce of weed. I didn't smoke pot, but I needed to have it for my company. And so I would do that, and I would go and buy dishes to go with whatever I was serving. If I was serving Asian food, then it had to be all the right dishes. And if it was Mexican food, it had to be all the right dishes. It just didn't. And it's really funny, because that was really where all my money went, and going out. That was what I did. So, I did that for a long time. I was, one of the things that I was very fortunate was that I didn't have any trouble getting jobs, and I always got good jobs. And so by the time I did that for several years. And by the time I was 21, I think I had just gotten my first car, maybe 20. And I was probably 20, and I drove drunk all the time. By that time I'm drinking. My favorite spots were Brennan's, Sports Harbor. I had this little circle that I drank in all over the marina. And when I was 21, I got my one and only DUI. And even well into sobriety, I blew a .27. Yeah. And I never, to this, probably as of 4 years ago, I would have told you I wasn't very drunk. I really wasn't that drunk. And I got to do this simulator thing that where you get to see how drunk you are at different levels. I was really, really drunk. And, and they didn't keep me overnight. They just held me until they released me to my old boss. And she had been drinking tequila all night. I'm like, oh my God. But what that did was it scared me. It was really expensive. And I remember I used to go, I had to go to driving school, and the driving class was over here in Culver City. By that time, I started working at McDonnell Douglas, like sometime before I went to court. I started working at McDonnell Douglas and then doing the waitressing thing at night. But I had to go to my driving school, or my DUI school was over in Culver City, and it was right in the same parking lot as the Scarlet Lady. I don't know if anybody knows that. But so I would go over at the break and have a drink, and then I would go back to my driving class. But I didn't drive anymore. That was a really good thing. I just stuck to going to the bars that were very local, and I could walk the circuit. So, it was like it just progressively got worse and worse. When I started drinking at Brennan's, it began, we would keep the bar open until like 4 in the morning, and then we would go party until 6, and then we would wait for the Prince of Wales to open, and then we'd go down there and shoot darts, and then I had to be at work at McDonnell Douglas at 7:30, and it really the days started getting very, very long. And so it was just, became time to make some decisions. So my decision was to quit the day job and stick to waitressing and bartending at night. And that's what I did. And then and that started for me a whole series of, it was like lower and lower companions. The people that I worked with at Marie Callender's were all older. I was always the baby. Like, I was always the really young one. And so the people that I worked with at Marie Callender's were working to put themselves through school or to do, so, they were like all doing something with their life, and this was their in-between job. And then they would move on with their life, and I was like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So I would just have to find some friends that weren't going anywhere. And that was, eventually that was where I ended up. Let's see, by the time I was 28 years old, I was no longer working a regular job at all. I was working for a drug dealer, and my job was to hold the drugs and the money and the guns in my apartment. And I had a bodyguard that lived in the apartment right next door to make sure nobody got into my apartment. And I would go and wake him up. Like, I would know where we dropped him off the night before, whether it was a motel or at one of his houses or wherever. And my job was, and I would have to get up and go wake him up by noon, so that he could get in the shower, get dressed, and we could get in this little teeny tiny car and drive around and make deliveries all day long. And that was my life. And it was 7 days a week. And then we would hit the bars about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and we would drink until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we would just do it. It was just this, we did it day after day after day. And that was it. I didn't have any paid vacation or holidays. I didn't have much. My apartment had a mattress and a television. I wasn't allowed to have anybody over because nobody was allowed to know where I lived. It was very pathetic. And I really, it was just kind of like I was looking at my life and I was like, how did I end up here? How is this what happened, where I ended up? So I had done that I'd been doing that for probably, 2.5 years. And I found out I was pregnant. And, that clicked, it did click a switch in me. There was something that happened. And when I found out I was pregnant, I knew it was a boy. I knew I wanted to have that baby. I knew I wanted to give that baby everything that I had never had as a child. I wanted to be a good mother. I always have, I've always loved kids and been really good with kids. And I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I knew that I could, I really believed that I could do it. Because all of this time, I'm not thinking that there's anything wrong with my drinking or anything wrong with the way I'm using, because everybody I know drinks and uses the same way, so it doesn't look bad, And never occurred to me that I couldn't make a decision to stop. And at that point, I still could. So I quit working for Richie, who Richie later ended up getting sober, and that's a whole other story. But I quit working for the drug dealer, I moved in with another drug dealer instead. But I didn't do the drugs, and I didn't drink. And I had this baby, and and I took really good care of myself. Like the whole time I was pregnant, I ate well. I took really good care of myself. And on October 25th, 1989, I gave birth to this beautiful little baby boy. And everything in me believed that I was going to give that child everything that I could, and I didn't drink or use at all for another 3 months, I think. I was working in a restaurant, and I really had no desire to. That's a really weird thing. Like the whole time I was pregnant, I just really had no desire to. I remember when I was pregnant, like there would be thoughts of after I have him, I want a margarita. I had, but once I'd had him, I had no desire to drink or use. And one night, my boyfriend told me, we had some people over, and he goes, why don't you go upstairs, because we had a jacuzzi on the roof of our building, and he said, why don't you go upstairs and get in the jacuzzi, and I'll watch the baby. And he goes, here, have a Grand Marnier. And it was just like this little snifter of Grand Marnier. I can see it. That's the last time I saw it, but I could see it then. And I went upstairs on the roof, and I got in the jacuzzi, and that's the last thing I remember. Because my disease had progressed. All that time that I didn't use, my disease progressed. And I had never stopped. Before that, I'd never stopped for any period of time. And now I haven't drank for a year. And I didn't know any of this at that time, but they pulled me out of the jacuzzi. Like I had a couple sips and went into, just like completely went out. So, and that was the beginning, and that kicked in the craving. And that was it. Like I had the obsession once again, and I didn't stop drinking for another 10 years almost. And it was never the same. I had hangovers every time. I had blackouts. I had, it was not fun anymore. There was no more fun drinking and just having a party. It was ugly. It was really ugly. So then began my series of moving all over the place, trying to, literally in a period of about 5 years, I lived in Rochester, New York, Utah twice, Bullhead City. Every time I came back here, Monrovia, I had cancer and had a hysterectomy. I got married. That lasted for 6 months. I married my sister's next door neighbor, who was conveniently the only alcoholic in Utah. So that was a match made in heaven. We made beer in the bathtub, and then I decided I didn't like being married after all, so I came home. And it was never knowing, and not one person ever said, like, wow, you just really need to look at your drinking. Not one person ever said, this isn't normal. And my sister she's the forever Al-Anon. She would bail me out, and but it wasn't, but she empathized with me. Everyone always empathized with me. And so by the time Galen was 5 years old, his school was, I kept him in school. I don't know how. He went to different schools, but I kept him in school. And that's so long ago, it seems like. And I got into a relationship with this guy that was, basically we did the dance of death for the next 7 years. And what that looked like was him trying to kill me trying to run him over in my car because he took my bike. It was ugly. We were the couple on the street corners screaming at each other that I never in a million years ever wanted to be, and that was me. When I came into this room, people knew who we were. I remember you. It was, and that was never, ever the person that I ever in a million years thought I would be. And we ended up, I ended up living in a tent on the side of the freeway with my son. Thank God for the homeless guys up in Culver City who absolutely took care of us. And fed us and always made sure Galen had toys. And I mean, it was amazing. And I would take him to school every day, and I would say, see that house right there? If anybody asks you where we live, tell them that we live in that house. Because if they know that we live in the tent, they'll take you away from me. And that was my existence. That was my sad, pathetic little existence. And that was the absolute best I could do. And, and I had this insane boyfriend stalking me. Every time I tried to leave, he would follow me or stalk me or put signs up, and it was just crazy. And so but he made me look good. He was definitely, so nobody even really, it was very funny now looking back, but nobody really knew I had a problem other than him. He was my problem, whereas I was drinking every day. I was drinking just as much. I was partying just as much, I didn't stay up all night long because I had to be on guard. I needed to make sure I knew what was going on. But, it was total insanity. So then I lost my son, and the insanity got even worse. And so by the time I came in here, I had a moment of clarity. I had gotten this great business deal together where I was going to go with this guy that I didn't know in my car that wasn't registered and didn't have insurance, and I didn't have a license, but we were going to go to the middle of the desert somewhere and get this great deal on this big bag of speed. And then I was going to come back here, and I was going to sell it. I'd put together $300, and I was going to bartend at this little tiny sleazy beer bar where I worked by day. And I was going to cashier at the sex shop across the street by night because it was open 24 hours, so I could just basically sell speed 24 hours a day. And I was going to be rich by the end of 6 months. And it was going to be a great life. And on my way over to pick this guy up, who I had met 2 days earlier, I had this moment of clarity where I knew that I was either going to end up dead or I was going to end up in prison. And I was terrified of ending up in prison. I had if you would have guaranteed me that I would have been dead, I probably would have gone through with it. But I didn't want to go to prison. And so I went and I used that $300, and I got a room right down the street for a week. I paid for a week. I had enough money left over to get a pizza and a big bottle of Southern Comfort. And I called the crazy boyfriend who had just gotten out of jail for trying to kill me and told him where I was in case he was looking. And so he came right over, and he basically watched me while I went through this whole detox. And he was the one that told me that they had free coffee here. And that's why I came. And, and it was, and that day changed my life. It absolutely changed my life. I've been sober ever since that day, ever since my first meeting, and it wasn't because I've done everything perfectly, and it wasn't because of anything excepting that God, I honestly believe God intervened in my life, and I was willing. I had no more ideas. That's the upside to absolutely hitting your bottom, is that you run out of ideas. And so you're willing to listen and take some direction. You don't have to go that low, but every time you go back out there, it's going to get lower and lower and lower. And you can take it from people like me that it doesn't get better. It absolutely does not get better, And so by the time I got sober, I was 36 years old, hadn't seen my son in 2 years. Basically had nothing. I went through Samo Shell, I went through Turning Point, I went through Chrysalis, I did all the services on the west side. I've gone through some really, at 3 years sober, I still didn't have really a God in my life. And I was staring at this huge black abyss that I never thought I would get out of. I really didn't think I would. And I went through the steps with this guy and he did a third step with me, and we went through We Agnostics page by page by page. And he pointed out in there, and he said, nowhere in here does it ever say that we find God. Because I didn't have this idea of God, that I couldn't have any faith, that I didn't have anything to believe in, that there was nothing there. And he said, nowhere does it talk about finding God. It always talks about searching. The closest that it comes to finding God is it says that deep down within every man, woman, and child is the idea. And we have that idea, and we have that spiritual connection, and that changed something in me, you know, and it allowed me to, he goes, you've been operating on hope for 3 years. And he goes, you need to operate on faith. And that changed something for me, you know, and today I can't tell you, I can't give you any form of what my higher power is. I can only tell you that it's huge and that it can do anything and that it wants me to be happy. And it's not about God being willing for me to stay sober. It's about me being willing. I'm the one that has to do the work. I'm the one that has to show up. I still go to at least 3 meetings a week, and usually more, usually 5 at least. I still have 2 commitments. I sponsor women. I have a sponsor. I work the steps with my sponsor. I go to a workshop, you know, not because I'm this amazing person, but it's because I've watched people go out at, you know, 2 years, 2 months, 5 years, 25 years. I don't want to. I know what's out there for me. I don't want to be pushing a shopping cart with 100,000 bags in it for the rest of my life, and that's what's waiting for me. I want to be here with you guys. So I hope you guys stay. Thanks.